Hi, this is Paul Loomis from the University of Guelph. I apologize in advance that this video wasn't made in a super professional manner, but hopefully it gives you an opportunity to see this new feeding system. It's not that new, we've had it here for a few years, but this feeding system that we have here and what I believe the potential for it could be. First, I'm going to explain the basic layout of it, and then I'll go into how we use it and where I think the potential could be. So, as you can see, there's a small stall that we built right here that the ewes can come into, and when they come in here, they have an ear tag. You can see it. Actually, this one here, we're using a shipping tag on her, and that one you can see in her right ear. There's a round tag. Sorry, I'll move my hand so it stays focused there. Those are RFID tags, which this antenna here will pick up, and then that will come here to the computer, and if the sheep is allowed to have more feed, it will then give her the allotment that she is allowed to have at that point in time. So briefly on this, this is what I worked with the students actually for a semester on. We started with a much simpler one, and we just found over time that this was the one that worked the best, where they can't steal from each other as much. And so by having it closed in the sides, they don't knock each other out, and actually having that flap on the back, the reason we do that is then what happens if a ewe wants to go into eat, she has to lift this up, and then she can go in and feed, and it closes in behind her. If another one wants to come and try hitting her to knock her out, that ewe will then lift this up to go in, and then when she wants to hit her, they will always kind of back up. So she backs up, and then she gets this again. And so it just acts as kind of a barrier. Not saying they can't still pester each other, but they don't pester each other nearly as much as they did before having that in there. So it's a relatively simple, but it seems to work as far as we can tell fairly well. So then on this here feeder, again, you can see the animals can come in. It'll recognize who it is. So the last ewe in here was G23. Okay, and I have to check because she's not supposed to be getting just that much feed. She should be getting more feed than that. So this girl's going to come in and check it out. She's obviously eaten. I'm quite sure she's already eaten for the day. So I'm just going to show you what would happen otherwise. I'll just go to device test, and I will turn it on. Okay, and you can see some feed dropping there. And then the ewe can come up and get her claim of feed. The way it works is that it drops you can program it. I have it programmed so it'll drop 0.15 kilograms at a time for her, and then it waits for 3 minutes before doing the next drop. Again, we observed with the students, and we found that gave them plenty time to eat up all the feed, and that way if they leave, they only lose 0.1 kilos. And if they stay, the next 150 grams will drop, and they can continue eating. And again, that will continue all the way through until their final allotment has been achieved, that they're not allowed to have any more. You can see on this particular system, we have 2 towers, and so we can actually set up how much of each of them goes into a drop. So if I use, for example, allowed to have a kilogram, I can make it 60% this, 40% that, or 20, 80, whatever mixture I want. Right now I have the same feed in both, but for example, I could make this like a 12% crude protein, and I can make this a 20% crude protein, and then I could hit any protein level I want for whichever particular ewe I have coming in. And of course, the energy levels would be changed by how much feed total I give them. And so, again, I can feed very, very accurately. As a matter of fact, I would say at this point in time with these feeders, I can feed them more accurately than we actually know how to. We don't have it set up at the top, but you can actually put a auger up there, a set of augers to each feeder. And if you put a sensor in the last one, then the feeders, this tower would fill automatically. And so basically your grain feeding would then be done. Once you turn the switch on, it would be done. And so you can see there's some other ewes that kind of hang around. They're hoping that maybe a little bit of feed will be left over, and they will try to see if they can get it. But one thing that you'll notice in this barn, just in general, when I walked in the barn, nobody started bleating and looking like how loud as it usually gets when you walk into a barn. And that's just because they don't associate me coming in the barn with feeding, because it's this machine that feeds them all the time. So that's just, I would say, a side benefit of it, but it's a pretty neat opportunity that also can happen from this. So I'm going to go now into the office, and I will show you basically how that works. So this is the computer screen from the program, and you can see it's obviously meant for sows. It uses the word farrowing and breeding. All these timings and so forth don't make sense for what we're using in sheep right now. But I basically I don't ever look at this breeding or farrowing columns. And so just the basics of it is so there's your ewes identification number. That's the ID tag she has in her ear. You can actually put a different ID tag in each ear. That way, if one happens to fall out, she will still be recognized by the feeding system. And so you don't have to try to find whoever it was that lost that tag. It can be a little bit of a challenge. What I do is I have my management tags every about 5 years. I go through a rotation of colors. And so if I find, for example, that F38 is missing a tag, I know I'm looking for a pink tag because F year is pink and G is blue, for example. So I can find them fairly quickly that way. So the next thing coming in here is what pen she's in. Okay, so I have 2 pens with feeders in here, so I can just move them around between the different pens. Next thing is what day they are on the feeding curve, and I'll talk about feeding curves here in a minute. And then I have which curve that she is going to be on, and then how much feed she's received for this day, and what percentage of her diet that is. And so I can see very quickly here that, for example, F33 has not eaten her feed yet for today. F36 has not eaten her feed yet for today. So I could keep an eye on her. It goes red once she hasn't eaten for a day, and it turns gray if it's been 2 days. And so we can use that to help us find the problem sheep. And you can change the coloring for that in terms of when it turns red or when it turns gray, so that you can get notified at the timeliness that you want it to be done at. So the curves are right here, and there's a bunch of curves I've put in, and you can see I haven't even used all the curves yet. There's still more space here for the curves. But basically what I have here is I have a late gestation one, so it's a ramp up one, so you can see it ramps up and then goes at a fairly high plane of feed until they lamb. And then what I have found though recently is that my older ewes are starting to get larger litters. I'm starting to get 3s and 4s, and the lambs are kind of small. So what I'm doing now is I have a high as well, a late gestation high. So I ramp it up again. I'm ramping it up by 100 grams a day until they get to the full 0.58 kilograms of feed a day, and then it just holds steady at that. And so what I'm doing now is my first timers, I give them this curve, and then anybody who's older gets this curve. If I have an older ewe that gives me a single lamb, it is a good chance it's going to be a fairly good sized lamb, and I'd cull her after that because I don't want that happening. Then after they lamb, and if you're doing like pregnancy litter size checking, if you're doing ultrasound to find out litter size, you could actually make this actually like litter size 1, 2, 3 in late gestation, for example, 1, 2, 3 lambs. It'd be really easy to do. And then after they're born, after the lambs are born, I put them on either a single, twin, or triplet lamb diet. So they're either getting 0.9, 1 kilo, or 1.3 kilos if they have triplets. And again, and then it goes on. I have it set up so that at around 90 days, it goes down by 100 grams a day until it gets down to just 100 grams a day. I don't drop it right off. I keep it at 100 grams a day. I find just giving him even just 100 grams a day just keeps them coming to the feeder. And so that they're looking for that feed every day, so it keeps them trained on the machine. I have a flushing diet. This one here is using the 2 different towers. That's why it's got the 2 different colors there. It's basically 50% one. Here you can see 50% one and 50% from tower 2. And they're getting a half a kilogram a day. Okay, I ramp it up again, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, and I just hold it at 0.5. And then what I always do is I set it up so that they're going to come down slowly after 4 weeks after I'm done breeding. So I may have to go in and change the day depending on how quickly I get my breeding done. I may have to change what day I'm at so that they ramp down how I want them. Gestation, early gestation, if I want them to gain some condition, I give them a half a kilo. If I don't want them to gain, then I'll bring them down to 0.2 kilos a day. But if I want them to gain, for example, a half a condition, if I don't want them to gain any condition, I'll just give them 100 grams a day again. Is that 100 grams a day really necessary? No, I could turn it off entirely, but I just like to give them 100 grams because it just keeps them coming to that feeder. And then I have a maintenance diet that's just 100 grams a day, or I can just turn it off where they get no feed whatsoever. So again, I can come into here and I can program which ewe gets which curve. So you can see right here, I got some on twins, triplets, single lambs, all that in there. In pen 2, you can see I have everybody on a flushing diet. I'm not sure why that one is only getting 100 grams as its maximum diet. It shouldn't be. Everybody in here should be getting at least the flushing diet right now. I'll just have to go through that a little bit more carefully and find out what's going on with that. So again, one of the beauties of this machine is I can set it up for when I get into late gestation. I can tell quickly, very quickly. Like at the end of the day, we'll look, and if there's a ewe in here that's still red, who has not eaten for that day, we go out and find her before we go home, and we put her in the feeder. And since I've been using this system, I shouldn't say since I've been using this system, since I've become comfortable with using the machine. So it took me a couple of years as we're playing with things and trying things out. But I would say for the last at least 4 years, I haven't had any pregnancy toxemia, because one of the beauties is I can see quickly if they're not coming in. If they're not eating their full diet, I can see them. I go out there, I catch them before they become ketotic, and I can put them in the feeder and get them to come back and start eating and do okay. Right? There's other things you can do in here. I can see different reports. So for example, the visit statistics, this just shows you when the sheep are in, and the pink shows when the sheep visited. So you can see they're basically visiting all the time. You can see what time it starts on at in the morning. So I have it turn on at 5 in the morning, and you can see as it gets closer to 5 o'clock, you get more and more visits, and then a lot of feeding. This machine is very busy until about, let's say, noon or more, and then it starts dropping off down lower until it peters out around maybe 6 p.m. or so. One of the questions I want to know is how many animals can I put on a feeder, because before this blue line stays too blue all the way through, and that we start missing, that some animals aren't eating just because they can never get in there. And so that's one of the first trials we want to do, is find out how many ewes, because as you can imagine, if we could get more ewes on there, that makes this system a whole lot more economical. I think that kind of basically explains. The second thing that we would want to then look at is we want to find out then what is feed savings. I'm fairly confident that we can get some feed savings with this machine, simply because I'm feeding everybody what they need. What you would be doing on your farm probably is, if you have some thin ewes, you may have to start increasing the amount of feed that you're giving them, or the concentration of the nutrients in that feed. And that means you're feeding everybody more, not just the ones who actually need it. In this case, I can actually feed just the ones that need it more feed. So I can be much more targeted in my approach. A few comments I've heard from producers who come through the barn here and take a look at my animals is they'll say, first of all, that my animals look like they're all fairly tight condition, and number two is that it's quiet. And so I think that we're probably feeding less feed, and I think that might be where, if there is going to be a value to this machine, I guess actually this other place that there could be value to this machine is labor. I'm done feeding. Right, I'm done feeding before I even step in the barn, and so it allows me to concentrate on the animals that need to be concentrated on. Half the animals in my barn I never have to look at, because they just take care of themselves, and then half of those others take a little bit of care, then half those others yet take even a little bit less care. And my challenge is to find them, and with this machine I can fairly quickly find them, and then I can come in and help them. Hopefully that gives you a very short, quick explanation of our feeding system that we have here. And just a couple of things I want to briefly explain. I think that this feeding system could be advantageous because of the labor again, and because of feed cost savings. And I think that even farmers who have feed TMR rations might have application for this, in terms of right now your TMR is probably set up for your 75th percentile of your sheep, or maybe even higher than that, which means all the sheep that are below that 75th percentile are being overfed. They're getting more than they actually need. And again, you're wasting feed, you're wasting cost to do that. And so, because if you just fed for the average animal, then that means your superior animals wouldn't be getting enough nutrients, getting enough feed that they need. And so with a system like this, what we can do is we can bring it down and say, all right, what we're going to do is feed a TMR that's going to be a base ration that's going to only hit the 25th percentile sheep. And then anybody who's above that now can get a top dress with this machine. They can come in and get that little bit of extra green that they need in order to bring their production levels up to the higher levels that they are. So for example, if you have twins, set up a diet for singles, and then you can have twins or triplets or anybody else being fed in there as well. I think that's all I wanted to say about it for now. If anybody has any questions, you can reach out to me and I'd be more than happy to explain them in more detail.